So here are the parts for the tires and the landing gear. There's the oleo strut. There's the covering for it. And that line is going to go up, plug up into the wing. So you just make sure that you keep things oriented. Those are landing gear doors. And these, it takes 5 of them, make a single tire. And then those go on the outside. Although we're going to end up kind of destroying those a little bit. But here is one on one side. Went very well. There's a little strut that goes up, a little auxiliary strut. But you can see like that that little piece of gear door has an interesting curve in it to correlate with the underneath of the belly there on the fuselage. Now, to get the center mark, I took the little pips that are on these that are from the laser cut, and they're absolutely perpendicular. On the other side, they give a straight line, so I was able to draw lines, and then get that and have a nice circle or a nice center, very easy to find. And all you do is sandwich all these pieces together. And I put that little axle piece on there because that helps center everything. So you go ahead and you're just using that to hold them and to make sure they come down sort of to be in line with each other. And then you just keep on keeping on. You keep doing this until you get all 5 done. And then you also add the outside piece, like the little papers. There they are, with the outside paper added, making sure they're stuck together. And then I end up on making sure that the hole is in there so that nothing's going anyplace. And then I set these aside with some clamps. I put some clamps all the way around these little alligator clamps. You could probably put some kind of weight on them, whatever, but just something to make sure they're in contact. Now, the oleo strut, that piece of paper rolls around the oleo strut, and you make sure that the axle, again, is opposite where that line is, because that line is what goes up. Now, there are some really interesting ways to do this. What I do is cheat. Rolling small things of paper for me is very difficult into a very thin cone. But what I do is I put a very thin bead of super glue along the edge, and then I orient the metal internal piece, making sure, again, I'm just quadruple checking, making sure that that part goes on the other side. So making sure that I got everything oriented correctly. And I very carefully just sort of plop the strut onto there on the very, very edge, as close as I can get to the edge. And what I do is I glue the piece of paper to the metal strut, to the piece of piano wire. And I glue it to my finger. And then I let that dry. And once that's dried, I end up just rolling that around. And I'll show you what I end up doing. But that's just going to roll around and make a strut. Now, you got these little gear doors. You can see there's funny shapes. And so what I do is I get that thing oriented correctly, and I start shaping it by eye. And then to figure out if I got the right shape, I figured something out. You just go ahead and stick it in where it's supposed to go in the fuselage. And you can end up getting the right part. I mean, you stick it in there, look at that. Just by eye, that's pretty dang close. I'm amazing. It was easy to do, is my point. And it's kind of intuitive where it's going to fold and bend. But you can use the components of the chin there, of the fuselage, behind the cowling as, well, that's how we want it to go. Now, right there's a couple little tiny lines, which is where the part of the wheel covering goes. And so, I don't know if you can see it well, but there's 2 little lines, and you're supposed to connect that one strip to those lines. I'm not sure how. So what I did was I cut them. They're very skinny. And then I kind of score them a little bit, and I bend them inside of that cover. The idea is I want to have a place, like a little lip, in which to put glue and add my oleo strut cover. And see, there's that little rectangular notch now. And that is where that strut, or that wheel cover down there, is going to end up going. The part that covers up the oleo strut. So I put a little glue on here, and I go ahead and just pop that in place, and it just barely fits, and I put just the very edge on there, and there it is. So now I just let that dry, and it'll be bendable. We can kind of move it around a little bit, but you make sure it's correct. Now, one thing I forgot to do, which I did on the other side, was I colored the inside of the wheel covers with silver Sharpie to look just kind of like aluminum or whatever. I don't know. Maybe if they'd have been gray, I suppose. But this is better than just having white paper, is my point. So now back to this. This, in the meantime, has dried. Now what I'm doing here is licking. I am licking the paper, and this is thin paper, by the way. This is just like paper that came from it's typing paper that came in the model. It's not the usual thick stuff that's part of the skins. So the thin paper, you can roll things easier. You can see I'm starting to get it to roll, and if you wet it a little bit, it rolls a little easier. You got to be careful. You don't want to get it waterlogged or saliva logged, but you do want to wet it a little bit. Normal people would use, you know, a brush and a little bit of water, but you just roll it up like that. Now the hard part for me anyway is keeping it straight. And then when I make it work one time or two times, make sure it rolls up tight. Then I add a little glue. Now it's critical here to not add too much glue, because what it ends up doing is just lubricating, and it just smears and things slide around, and then when you try to roll, it won't bite, and you'll just get like a sloppy mess, and you end up having an oblong strut. What you want to do, of course, is roll it so that it layers like onions on top of itself, and you with a metal center with the piano wire center. So I just roll this together, and this is my least favorite thing to do with paper models. I have not figured out how to do this very well. There are ways to do it with some kind of jigs and clear plastic and rolling things together and letting things dry, and they work really well, but they're kind of painful to do, but they're something that you should do if it's really difficult. These are so small, I figured this would work. All I'm doing is trying to keep it even and roll it around, and I'm making sure that it's actually rolling into a circle. And this one worked out fairly well. If you look closely, you can see that my seam is kind of like a candy cane, or it kind of swirls, meaning that it did not roll perfectly perpendicular. It should end up as a line, a nice vertical line, and it didn't, which means no, it's not perfect. But again, it's going to be okay. I'm going to end up painting those anyway because they kind of stand out. They're too bright, I think, on the finished model. I'm going to paint them a different color. Plus, I'll put some brake lines on them. Now, there are holes in there, remember, and they fit in, and it's neat. The design is such that you almost automatically get the correct sort of cant of the oleo strut. So I take a little time to make sure it looks like the other side, put a little bit of super glue on the end, and slide it back in, making sure that the little L down there is facing out towards the wingtip. Again, just following the directions, the pictures, and I'm just making sure that it's right. It's lined up with the other one. It's got the same slant. It's vertical. It's supposed to be at right angles to that middle section. So that's good. In the meantime, this has dried. Pull off all my alligator clips. And now, what I want to do is put this into some kind of make a something that would be a chuck that I could stick into a chuck. I used to have something that would screw into the base of a piece of balsa wood or something, and then that would go on a Dremel tool and spin. But I've lost that, or I can't find it. Here I'm trying to just make sure the hole is going through and it's straight, because what I end up doing is gluing the wheel onto the end of a toothpick, which tends to fit in the Dremel just fine. So I cut off a little piece here. That's going to be my shaft that'll go into the Dremel tool, into the chuck of the tool. I kind of had to make that little pointy on the end, and then I shove it in that hole, and you make sure it's straight by pushing in on it, and then also twisting and making sure that it looks good. When you're ready, you put some super glue in there, pop this thing in, and the key is to get it straight. And you have time to fiddle and bend and make sure it's okay. And you twist it. If you twist it in your fingers and it's not wobbling, it's straight. And you get it as close as you can. I mean, it's not that's not bad. That's not probably like NASA tolerance, but it's gonna be good enough for us, I think. That looks pretty good. So then, just to make sure it dries, mostly just because it dries quicker this way, I hit it with a little zip kicker, because now the next step is to go into the garage where you're banished, with the power tools, and stick this thing into a Dremel tool and take some sandpaper and shape it into a wheel, because right now it looks silly. Okay, so off we go into the garage. So there I am, sticking a little chuck, making sure that's tight, making sure it's straight, and then I carefully turn this thing on. It starts to spin, and then take some coarse sandpaper, relatively coarse sandpaper, and I start to form this, and I concentrate on the edge and making sort of a curve on either end. And again, just like a lathe, it works really well. Doing that kind of work is fun. You just make sure that you stop it once in a while and check it, and you're trying to get a nice shape. In the meantime, you're also making sure that on the edge that you get a nice, you know, um, essentially tire tread too. And once it looks pretty good, you can see it's actually curved around. Now I go back with a little bit of lighter grade sandpaper just to finish it off. This doesn't take off much material, but it smooths things out considerably. Looks good, and then it'll take paint a little bit better, I think. Again, I don't know why they give those ends the way they do, the paper ends, because you can see if you do this, you destroy them anyway. I clip off the piece there, and I can clip it off flush with an X-Acto blade, but there's your wheel. And the hub is in there, but what I ended up doing is putting this onto a bigger drill and use it as a little handle. And and here I'm making sure I drill it out, because there it goes through the toothpick. So now you actually have a hole for the axle again. And here I just make sure that it actually fits, because sometimes you run into trouble. But there I'm making sure which side goes in, because I want the part that had the little nibbin of the toothpick, I want that on the outside, because that's where the curved wheel cover is going to attach to. Okay, give it a little tiny space. Now what I do is I use gray or dark gray or some mixed color. I tend to use grays. Black, straight black looks too toy-like on airplanes, I think. So I tend to avoid that. I use either dark gray or light gray or something in between. And if you got something that's weathered, like these probably should get weathered ultimately, because they are, the rest of the model is so beautifully weathered by the artist that even these painted like a dark gray, they don't look as silly as they would if they were just jet black, but they need a little help. And all I do is go around here very carefully and go up and paint up to the hub. Not hard to do. I've got my little visors on, by the way. And after a while, you end up with a wheel. And you just keep doing that. And then when it's all dry, you're good. Now that little door, that little tiny rectangular door, goes up at the end. So I put some glue on the tip of it. And then I just go ahead and attach it. And it sits, it's the part that covers the top part of the oleo strut. And it looks fine just where it is. So the next thing is to put the wheel on. Again, I've tested this, so this shouldn't be a problem. Little super glue, slide the wheel in place, and you make sure it's solid and straight before you touch it with a zip kicker. Not that I've ever had a problem with that. Now, this piece slides under there, but then how you know where it's supposed to go is it covers like the middle part of the tire hub, of the wheel hub. So I put a little glue on there and a little glue up into the oleo strut itself. And I'm just going to glue this directly to the strut. I mean, it should probably have brackets and stuff, but this will be fine. It goes with the simple design of the model. It looks really good. So I just put it in until it's about where I think it should go, and make sure it's good and solid. Here it's out a little bit, so I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the base of the oleo strut down there. In this case, I use a little super glue, put a little touch in there, and then I end up squeezing that shut, and then that's it. And I make sure that the little wheel cover looks the same in terms of how does it look compared to the other side. And they look pretty good. The curves are the same. You can see the pieces. They look good. Now there's an auxiliary little retract mechanism that goes on the inside, which I won't show putting. It's just a piece of wire with some paper wrapped around it. But that's going to go in and finish off the job. It should make it look pretty good. And then here I just want to show you. It's easier maybe if I hold the little camera. Just show it to you. Overall, it sits nice. This is the first time I put it on its little feet. So it looked really nice. It has a good stance. I think it's a little tall. I think the struts are measured so that they're like in flight. So I should have probably cut them down a little bit because there's weight of the airplane on there. So, but overall, I think it looks great, and you can see it's so nice to have on its wheels. And now I can put stuff on the underside of the wings, and it won't get damaged. So onward and upward, tally ho!